fans who, you know, watch everything, read everything, find everything they can about their favorite, and then move on, Annette started global newsletters and wrote 6 or 7 books on her favorite, Harold Lloyd. I think that qualifies her for superfan status. She also found a man to marry named Lloyd. I think that's a little superfan to me. This is the first time that I've met Annette in the flesh, but I feel like I've gotten to know her during my brief membership in the Daughters of Naldi, which is a listserv group of very enlightened ladies who are devoted to silent film history. I've been impressed with Annette's enthusiasm and love of silent films and her generous encouragement to her fellow Dons to follow their silent film project dreams, be they books or documentaries or even film festivals. It's her love of silent films and her insights into Harold Lloyd's career in particular that prompted us to invite her to our festival this year, and we're so very pleased she accepted. She's going to be introducing Harold Lloyd's 1928 film Speedy, an Academy Award nominee in a category that was only done this first year. I'll let her explain. Please join me in welcoming Annette D'Agostino Lloyd.
What a lovely introduction. I want to first thank not only the Kansas Silent Film Festival Committee, all of you for being so warm and generous and accepting me here. It's a real thrill to be here amongst you good folks and allowing me to speak on my hero. And I will try very, very hard not to go on too long. I don't want to inundate because he's the star of the film, or he's the star tonight. I do want to, though, being the first Oscar theme, the first Academy Awards, rather, they didn't have Oscar yet. It wasn't a nickname that was given at that point. But Harold Lloyd has a number of other connections to the Academy Awards. He got his own Academy Award, an honorary Academy Award in 1952, awarded in March of 1953, as a master comedian and good citizen. And hopefully you'll see an example of that master comic tonight. Also, though, Harold Lloyd was one of the founding members of the Motion Picture Academy. He was a founding member of the Actors Branch. You may know that there were actually 6 branches to the Motion Picture Academy: actors, directors, lawyers, producers, technicians, and writers. And amongst the actors, Richard Barthelmess, Jack Holt, Conrad Nagel, Milton Sills, Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, and Harold Lloyd were the founding members of the Actors Branch. So it's neat that Harold not only had a nomination, and it wasn't actually him, it was his film, but I'll go into that in just a second. But before I start talking about Speedy, I want to tell you a very, very, very short story, because I think it has a great deal of bearing on not only, well, what's going on tonight, but the power of Harold Lloyd's career. Back in 1993, when I was in the midst of writing my first book, my very first book, and it was on Harold Lloyd, I was in Nebraska. I was there to help celebrate the centennial of Harold Lloyd, who was born in Bertrand, Nebraska in April of 1893. So in 1993, on my own dime, fresh out of graduate school, I decided to go to Nebraska, and it was there that I got to see my very first Harold Lloyd film projected on a big screen. And it was Safety Last, and it was accompanied by a name you might know, the great Gaylord Carter, who was a master. And it was such a thrill for me. But there was one time, now at this point I had much longer hair, and I was still coloring it, and I was wearing a long black raincoat and jeans, and my hair was really curly, and it was, I didn't look like I was from Berkshire, Nebraska. So I'm walking down Pawnee Street, which was the actual street that Harold Lloyd was born on, and his birthplace is still there at 24 Pawnee Street. And I'm walking down, I'm just kind of soaking in being in the town where my hero was born. And lo and behold, a woman came out of her doorway. And she said, excuse me. And I said, hi, how are you? She said, you're not from here, are you? And I said, no, actually, I'm from Staten Island, New York. That's where I was living at the time, where I was born, actually. She said, I've never talked to anybody from New York. Can I talk to you? And I said, sure. So she and I, and this is a street that has no sidewalks. It was all, it wasn't a dirt road, but it was as close to a dirt road as you can get. She and I sat on her stoop and talked for about 20 minutes. She asked me what New York was like, what it was like growing up there, how I got involved with Harold Lloyd and all of that jazz, And it struck me at that moment. Now, I didn't know then as much as I know now about Lloyd, but the thing I did know about him at that early phase of my work on him was that he was a genuinely nice person, a good person, and a really great filmmaker. I learned that day, and I've learned through 2 trips to Iowa and a couple of trips to Michigan and a couple of places in between. I firmly believe that the greatness of Harold Lloyd and the power of his comedies and the strength of the man and the power of his filmmaking roots from his Midwest roots. I believe that because he was born in Nebraska, grew up in Nebraska and parts of Colorado as well, I think that the atmosphere contributed a great deal to the great comic and the great filmmaker that he became. I wanted to let you know that because I'm having a great time here. So there you go. This career, I'll go more into it obviously tomorrow night when I speak with you again, but this film that we're going to see is Harold Lloyd's final silent film. It's the final silent comedy. It actually wasn't planned to be. He planned his next film to be a silent film, but then the sound rage was all about, and they decided, you know what, let's remake this film. Let's spend $900,000 more and make this a talkie. And it was his biggest grossing film ever, called Welcome Danger. But yes, Harold Lloyd, this film was nominated in a category that had a shelf life of 1 year. It was called Best Comedy Direction. 1 year that category existed, and Lloyd was nominated. There were only 2 nominees. And sadly, the director of this film, Ted Wilde, did not get the Oscar, but we're proud that he got the nomination. The interesting thing, though, is that the winner of the Oscar, or the Academy Award, the Academy First Award, as it's properly called, for Best Comedy Direction, went to Louis Milestone. Louis Milestone directed, as we saw in the wonderful clip compilation, directed 2 Arabian Nights. Interestingly, for those of you who are fans of Lloyd and appreciators, aficionados of minutia, Louis Milestone was the first director of The Kid Brother, which was the film that Lloyd made prior to Speedy. And then he had to leave because of contractual obligations, and then a few other people came on and finished the direction of The Kid Brother, which is one of my very favorite of his films. Speedy is an interesting title for this film because Speedy was the nickname of Harold Lloyd. From boyhood, probably, we don't exactly know exactly when it was, but we're thinking that it was in his early teens. He and his father went to a play, and the boy's name in the play was Harold, but he liked to call himself Speedy. And from that time on, Harold's father, whose nickname was Foxy, they were a nickname family, he was known as Speedy. And the guys in Harold Lloyd Corporation, friends, family, they called him Speedy. And he was known as Speedy most of his life. Speedy was not just used as a nickname in Speedy, though. I don't know if any of you have ever seen a wonderful film called The Freshman, which was released in 1925. But in The Freshman, Harold Lamb's nickname was Speedy. So this is not the first time you're going to see Harold Lloyd playing Speedy. As I mentioned, that this was Harold's final silent film, and it was at a point in his career where Harold did not need powerful cameo co-stars. He did not need them. He was at the top of the game in terms of box office, in terms of popularity. He was right at the pinnacle. However, Ted Wilde, the director, was able to get Harold a very powerful New York-based co-star. See, Ted Wilde, earlier in 1927, had directed a film called Babe Comes Home, starring George Herman Babe Ruth, who was then star of the New York Yankees baseball team. Ted Wilde decided to try to get Babe for the film, and at that time, I'll mention in a second, when the crew came to New York, the Yankees were not in town, but then they eventually did get back into town, back to the Yankee Stadium, the old Yankee Stadium. They redid it again. The Yankee Stadium that you're going to see in Speedy was then 4 years old. You're going to see a game in it. And it's interesting, I did my research, and that game that we're going to see was actually shot on August 27th of 1927. The Yankees in that game beat the Boston Red Sox 10-3. And in that film, Babe Ruth hit the 43rd of his then record 60 home runs that season. Later that year, Babe Ruth gave Harold Lloyd the bat with which he hit the 60th home run. They became very, very good friends and big fans of each other. In the midst of the how many of you have seen Speedy? Raise a pretty good number. So how many of you have not seen Speedy? Oh, are you in for a treat? Oh my gosh. This film was shot in New York. I was born in New York. It's one of the biggest reasons why I love this film so much, because I consider it not only a great film, but it's a historic relic. So much of what you're going to see doesn't exist anymore. A lot of it does, but you're going to see Coney Island in a way you've never seen it before. You're going to see neighborhoods captured, streets, cobblestone still. It's a true experience. However, there were a couple of sequences that the crew was in town in New York for 16 weeks. They were originally only supposed to be there for 4 weeks, but it kind of mushroomed, and they stayed a little bit longer than they anticipated. However, there were some shots that they forgot to get. So what they did was they went back to California, and Harold had a location ranch that in Westwood, California. How many of you have been to Los Angeles? Okay, I don't know if you know where Westwood is, and down at the end of Sunset Boulevard. But there's a location. It's actually off Santa Monica Boulevard. This ranch, where it was, they built a replica of the. There's going to be a street, you're going to see a big fight scene between some old men and gang. An old men and a gang. It sounds strange, but it works. And that's actually a set that they built on this location ranch. Now, the Harold Lloyd Corporation, about 10 years later, 1937, sold that property to the Mormon Church. They later built a Mormon temple there, and a world-renowned family history center where when I lived in Los Angeles, did a lot of research at that, on genealogy. I've done the full genealogy of Lloyd's family. I haven't done my own yet. Someday maybe I'll have to do mine, but I've done a lot of his. Couple of other little things for you to look for. In the midst of, at the end of the film, you're going to see a spectacular chase scene that rivals anything ever put on film. You're going to also see a crash of Harold's horse car crashing into the beam of an elevated subway. Oh, actually, no, it's elevated railway. Subway means under. Railway up above. An elevated, we called it the L. That's what we used to call it in New York. This accident, though, was not intended, it wasn't planned. It was an accident. It was an accident that was an accident. But when they had shot it, and when they saw that the horse was okay, the driver was okay, they had captured the whole thing on film, what they decided to do on the spot was rewrite a couple of things and include that in the film. I find that amazing that, they had the ingenuity and the bravery to rewrite stuff right off the bat and include a sequence about a manhole cover becoming a wheel, replacing a wheel that had broken in the crash. It's pretty cool when you think about it. And one other minor piece of trivia that I think you'll like. In this sequence that I mentioned to you before about a fight scene between a bunch of old men and a gang, there's a sequence there where a man who runs a Chinese laundry comes out and makes very creative use of a hot iron. Okay? You'll see what I mean by creative use. I don't want to go into, biologicals. But the interesting thing is that gag was deemed the heartiest laugh amongst 1928 audiences by it's a fellow by the name of P.K. Tomian, who put together a device called a laugh-o-gram. And the speedy laugh-o-graph measured the power and the intensity of laughter in the midst of these, and that sequence was judged to be the funniest in the film. We'll see if you agree. You can see a lot that you're going to really enjoy. I want you to really think about this film, however, as the true historic relic that it is. Not just because it was filmed in New York and I was born there, but because it captures a great city in a great story. And I really hope you enjoy it. From 1928, April 7th to be precise, in 8 reels, Harold Lloyd and Ann Christie and Babe Ruth in Speedy. Enjoy it.